What red flags about a company have you encountered while interviewing for a job? Serious. On finding out who had your job previously, avoid any of the following. 15 people in the past 2 years. 1 person for the past 20 years. They will hate you either way, and you will come to hate them. Depends emo. 1 person in 20 years might indicate that she retired or is about to retire and will only learn you in. So they left on good terms and will be missed, but never hated. If they ask you to pay a single cent for anything, you are being scammed. No legitimate job I've had has ever required me to pay for anything necessary to do my job. I feel like I should clarify. I was referring to employers who require you to buy things from them to do your job, not having to buy a pair of shoes, or a uniform, a small tool set, or get maintainer certification. I had to buy my safety boots first day at a factory. They took it off my first paycheck. Union job, and in the contract got you a free pair every year past the first. We pay for 38 hours a week, but we expect at least 55 hours as a show of faith and loyalty. We guarantee you at least minimum wage. Our clients come first, so it is a condition that if required, you cancel leave if directed and attend work. With that last one, I asked for clarification and was told that if I was about to step on a plane and they called, I was to forfeit my plane ticket and hotel bookings and go to work. That wasn't even the worst stuff. The only time I've ever lost my temper with an interviewer. When I went to their website, there were way too many statements in large bold font about how much money you can make with few credentials. Our top performers make over 100k a year. No college degree required. Sign up now. I didn't know that strip clubs wanted people to apply online. One question I always ask the interviewers is, if you had a magic wand and change anything about the company, what would you change? Biggest red flag for me is when different interviewers give the opposite answer. No way do I want to join a company in the middle of a turf war. Cool question. I'll have to keep that one in mind. After completing the initial interview, I did some research. Apparently the dental company I was interviewing for was owned by Scientologists and required their employees to attend mandatory Scientology classes. Also, they made me take an IQ test, which was wholly unlike any IQ I've ever taken before. If anyone's curious, the company is Brightside Dental. Went for a marketing company which was selling bulls door to door. Not my style. And the ad online lied. Not to mention the man interviewing me was my age, 20s, and flirted with me. Asked me if I had a boyfriend and how long I was with him, if we lived together, etc. Very creepy and unprofessional. Desperate for a job, I reluctantly agreed to try one day to see what it was like. When he called the next day, I immediately declined. Horrid, unprofessional, creepy, worst experience ever. Interview was rescheduled twice. And once I actually got to the interview, I found the office was a mess and everything was completely disorganized, and during the interview the phone rang at least 3 dozen times and my interviewer stopped the interview each time to answer the phone in order to give people directions or information about applying for positions. Had it not been for the phone calls, our interview would have lasted a minute, as she pretty much asked me 3 questions and then wanted to schedule me for a follow-up with someone else another day. Ridiculous. On top of all that, my interviewer was basically the secretary, and practically fresh out of college, and seemed in way over her head. Then, to top it all off, the position turned out to be temp to perm, and it wasn't even the same position I applied for. They had several different positions to fill in different departments, and when I said I intended to apply for the one advertised, she shrugged. Had an interview scheduled for what sounded like a job I am well qualified for. The day before the interview, I drove out to the business to see it. It has no signage, was old and in a rundown industrial area. I cancelled on some BS excuse. Didn't have the heart to tell them what I thought of the place. And another potential MIB recruit falls at the first hurdle. I returned a call from a potential interview asking what time she'd like to meet. She started yelling at me barely 2 sentences in, telling me I was an irresponsible little shitty. I tried to explain that I hadn't scheduled an interview yet. She called back an hour later, explaining that she thought I was someone else who didn't show up to their interview. She apologized profusely and told me she'd love to interview me if I was brave enough. Owner of the company during the interview: I know your last employer had a game room. Here we have fun by working hard. I worked there for 2 years, but I was unemployed when I took the job. I interviewed for a fairly high position, head of operations, for a medium-sized company. The owner kept taking business calls while interviewing me, interrupted at least 12 times in an hour, made me feel unimportant, and he probably would be difficult to communicate with in the future. They ended up offering me the position. I declined. Thankfully I found a much better company since. As someone who has worked in many crap jobs before finding one I love and then moving on to work for myself, they all seem to follow a pattern. They always want you to jump through hoops and answer impossible what would you do, how would you style scenarios. There's absolutely no room for negotiation on salary or your pay. They have no idea what you're interviewing for or who you are until they pull up your application. The words business opportunity, unlimited earnings potential, financial freedom ever come out of their mouth. Seriously, don't ever fall for this crap like Cutco knives or any of the MLM schemes. Nothing drove me crazier than answering those stupid "but what would you do if" scenario questions. From my experience, jobs worth working for is mostly just negotiating pay during the interview. They call you in for an interview because they know you're good at what you do and they're interested. They're not sending out mass advertisements for employees because they know their turnover rate is crap. What would you do if Tom was slacking behind at his position and you were slightly ahead at your position? Wonder why you hired Tom to do that job probably. I hate questions like that, and it was always jobs that paid minimum wage that would ask me dumb crap like that. They always expected you to treat the position like a career and like the best thing that ever happened to you. Not during the interview, but immediately after, I joined a small business that chartered aircraft, but didn't own any. He said his business was successful, had quite a few employees, and I would be their IT tech, repairing computers, running cables, etc., etc. When I got there my first day, it was just him and his college drinking buddy, who had partied so hard he had developed severe epilepsy. I fixed up his systems, offered suggestions to replace his server, which was an XP desktop hooked directly to the internet, with personal info and credit card numbers in text files, with the firewall disabled because it got in the way. Soon as I was done with everything he would let me work on, I was suddenly thrust into the role of cold calling aircraft owners to gather their information, see if they were available for chartering, etc. He also had me calling customers during their trips to see how their flights were, calling the airports to make sure they knew a plane was coming in half an hour, and setting up catering. Not what I signed up for. He also had me DJ at his son's birthday party, and by DJ I mean he bought an expensive mixer and just had me play an iTunes playlist. Then there was the time where I found one of the companies we chartered aircraft from was also chartering to one of his competitors with separate clients. So he sent them a nasty email and cut all ties for them working with his enemies. That's right. Instead of competing like a regular businessman, offering better bids and services, he basically cut off his arm by cutting off an income source, just because they would charter one of their planes with a competitor instead of him. 4 months in, after adding hundreds of customers and aircraft owners to his database, he fired me for not being the right fit. Worst experience ever. I sank into depression, was unemployed for a couple months, and eventually landed a job in a call center that was utter heck. However, that gave me enough experience to land a real IT job, so I guess every storm has a silver lining. TLDR got hired for IT, ended up as a data entering DJ for a rich prick and his drinking buddy. I didn't even make it to the interview. I had to make a profile on their website to fill out an online application. In the middle of the application I had second thoughts, and saved it as a draft to maybe complete later. The next couple days involved them calling me 4 times a day to tell me to hurry and finish my application so they could schedule an interview with me. Ended up blocking their number and deleting my profile. I had a series of interviews by a couple of people over the course of a week. Not so strange, but in what I thought was the final interview, the afternoon manager was out because of a miscarriage. Shame too, because it's her second or third one. Okay, that's an inappropriate amount of information about someone that I don't even know. So I interviewed with the night manager. Things went fine after that rocky start, until they called with the offer the next week. We're offering you the overnight and scheduled position. but I had applied for a .6 afternoon position. Yeah, but we're also offering 30% less than the job description because while you have 4 years of experience, it isn't with us. That doesn't make any sense. Well, I suppose you'll want to interview with the afternoon manager if you are interested in that position. Should I set that up now? I meant to. She was out for personal reasons that day, and why should it entirely matter who I interviewed with? I didn't apply to that other job specifically because I wanted .6 fate in the afternoon. Oh great. So you'll take the overnight position? No, but thank you for all the experience interviewing with you. I'll take it on to the next company. Red flags everywhere. I nuked that bridge from orbit. Interview went fine. I sent a follow-up email the next day. After a week of not hearing anything, I sent them another email asking how it was going. Their response was, "Oh sorry, so busy. We'll get back to you tomorrow." But they never did. Every week for a month I'd contact them to see if there was any progress, and every week they'd blow me off. They finally called me and offered me a job after a month and a half. The offer was low and I had already made up my mind that I wasn't going to work for them. But the topper was that the HR woman insisted I get back to her the next morning with my answer. Never called them back. If an employer expects an answer within 24 hours but they blow you off for a month, that shows how much they value your time. They had 3 statements that they are proud of: the mission statement, the vision statement, the value statement. None of them mentioned employees or customers. Answering a question in a generic way. Q. Would I be able to get training to get a professional qualification? A. Yeah, there is a lot of training available. We put a bunch of stuff on our personal intranet. Q. How would I progress in this role? A. The structure of the company is like this. So you will start at executive and then move your way up to manager, senior manager, etc. Basically non-answers that are not specific. I find these are red flags. Depending what you want from the organization. These have all been for very big companies, so that could be why it is less specific. I interviewed for a job at a charter school. 1. The dean told me how happy she is that she no longer teaches art there, and was thrilled to get into admin. 2. The dean told me about several students and the types of mental illnesses they had, because they would have been in my class. 3. The dean told me the previous teacher up and quit giving minimum notice. A field analyst position. 1. Everyone kept referring to the field worker's pain, and that they need another analyst to spread out the pain burden annoyance of field workers' travel. As soon as they started going on with this, I was done. They made the job sound like half the time it's going to suck, so I wasn't interested. I was working for a fast food chain in high school college, and I would transfer stores as I moved. One store held open interviews every Tuesday because the turnover rate was so high. It remains to this day my least favorite place of employment because it was so dang awful. My second least favorite was a retail store. For the most part it wasn't hard at all, and it could have been a pleasant place to work. The red flag was, during the interview, I was told they provided store credit cards and had quotas to fill. I knew that would be crappy, but a job's a job. It ended up making my job a living heck because, besides being morally opposed to getting people sign up for the cards, as a cashier the pressure for the quota was unreal. Not at an interview, but on an application. One of the requirements for a paid internship was must be able to handle multiple projects in a fast-paced environment from multiple departments with little to no guidance. Side note, as undesirable as it is, in a lot of trades, being hired as a temp is very, very common. So you might just have to suck it up sometimes, especially in manufacturing at entry and low-level positions. Went in for an interview for a coding position. They asked the standard coding questions, couple logic puzzles, the FizzBuzz code exercise, etc. Then they proceeded to grill me on Cassandra, the DB system Facebook created uses. A DB system I've literally read like 3 articles on and have never actually used. I had mentioned it in passing during the phone interview because they asked if I kept up on new technologies. I was later offered a position as a dev DBA working on their Cassandra DB server, citing the fact that I knew Cassandra existed as the primary reason for offering the position. That sounded shady as frick to me, and I would probably be in over my head on a system I don't really understand while also being paid considerably less than the position offered due to lack of experience. Plus I was sick of unprofessional code shops. Moved to Chicago from Texas in 2009 as my wife had been promoted and relocated for work. I got an interview for an AFLAC position and rented a car to make it to the site. I thought this was good as my previous work position dealt with insurance before and I was familiar with the overall industry. As soon as I drove up, I realized that this was some low rent building with dozens of other companies and franchises but didn't actually use the office space for work. Immediate first red flag. Checked in for what it was worth and was ushered into a room only slightly partitioned from the reception desk and realized there were a couple dozen people there. Now this was at 9 AM or so in the middle of the week and the AFLAC office shouldn't be interviewing this many people for a position. Next red flag. Turns out that this was a dude that sold AFLAC insurance but was trying to get regular people to do his door-to-door canvassing and to take unsuspecting potential buyers for a ride. When I asked him some pointed questions, he didn't even seem knowledgeable about AFLAC or the insurance industry. He looked and sounded sleazy, he gave few good answers and ultimately kept using the phrases limitless earning potential and you make your own hours. Given the state of the early 2009 economy, most people without jobs were looking for anything they could get. This guy was trying to sucker people. I loudly got up in the middle of it all, made a scene spectacle and nearly shouted this guy out for trying to farm out crap positions for crap pay to people that didn't know his scam. That he was lying to people about the pay and how compensation worked. He stood there, dumbfounded, and I again asserted that he is trying to use the effort of the people present in order to line his pockets, not help them make money in a stable position. No fewer than a dozen people walked out with me, but the rest were either too desperate or too dumb to realize a scam when it is pointed out to them. I once interviewed with a company 8 times. Each time they were like, "We really like you but just need one more interview with this other manager engineer just to be sure." That was a massive red flag in hindsight. Also, during the last interview they kept asking about whether I was okay working overtime and late hours for no extra pay. Dodge a bullet there in hindsight. The interview I had for my current job should have set off some red flags, but I ignored them. I don't regret that. This is probably the best job I've had. The HR guy said I wouldn't be expected to travel off campus for the interview. You only need that to happen once before you start asking. But tried to call me an hour before the interview started, aka when I was told to be on site, to see if I could reschedule. The shuttle wouldn't get me to the right building in time. When I was fresh out of college I probably would have agreed to come back the next day. Instead I straight told him that was unacceptable. I had taken a day off work to be here and calling me at the last minute to have me come back because he fricked up just wasn't going to fly. So a supervisor, not the one who was set to interview me, drove over. The supervisor started the interview by saying he hadn't read my resume and asked me to describe it for him. Then instead of asking me questions he just explained the systems they use and what the department does. I was offered a job like 2 months later, accepted right away, couldn't be happier. When they try and pull a bait and switch on you during the interview. I applied for a programmer job that was looking for an experienced professional, someone with 5+ years of experience, which I had. Get to the interview and we discuss experience and background, what my positives and negatives were. They asked if I had experience with a particular programming genre and I replied honestly with no. Fine, everything is okay at this point. Next I go off to take a proficiency test on my abilities and got every question right except for the one that I mentioned earlier about not having any experience with. Nothing wrong from either me or the company at this point. Then comes in the manager owner of the company who wants to talk to me and we discuss my experience, salary range, etc. During which he proceeds to downplay my resume and put me down but wants to throw me a bone by offering me a junior entry level position. In other words, they were trying to attract top level candidates but pay them beginner level wage, so they try to bully the candidate during the interview. I respectfully declined the offer and left. I won't name the company because I'm a bit scared of what they might do to me if they found out. I recently graduated with an engineering degree and was pursuing a job in my field. It was a stressful experience, so I was understandably excited when a company called me, told me they liked my qualifications, and immediately offered me a job. Being the rational person that I am though, I asked to visit the company first, before making my choice. and they tentatively agreed. My first red flag was their vague website. Despite being assured that they were an engineering company, I could not even determine what they do from their site. It was just a bunch of stuff about customer and employee satisfaction. Whatever. I would learn more once I drove over there. I drove to the company and was met at the front door by the employer, who escorted me through the security doors. The second we entered, he made a clear point about not talking about anything I saw there. He said it with the most artificial smile I can imagine, and I felt like I was being led by a wolf in sheep's clothing. Nothing could be seen of the work environment from the entrance, just an array of tables where the employees took their lunch. We walked down a long hallway before I eventually saw what the company did. It looked exactly like a sweatshop. A pair of armed guards stood before another set of security gates, beyond which I could set rows and rows of tables with workers all in identical gowns and face masks hunched over products that I could not make out from that distance. I asked if we could get closer, so I could see what they were working on, and the employer adamantly refused, but did do so with that artificial smile on his face. He told me I shouldn't look in that direction, that the guards wouldn't like it, and he reminded me again that I could not talk to anyone about what I saw there that day. He led me to a cubicle off to the side and asked me what I thought, if I'd like to join. I told him I wanted to focus my career on engineering design, and he gave me every assurance that that was their line of work. It certainly didn't look like engineering work though, so I pressed him. Every answer he gave was the very definition of vague, but eventually I gleaned that the company did electronic repairs or something. I told him I would think about it and call him. He reminded once again not to talk about what I saw there. The employer walked me back to the entrance and reminded me one last time to not talk about what I saw while there. I said of course, but secretly wondered if I should be reporting this company to the FBI. You should report them. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.